This is Snapshots, the podcast that tells the short stories about the impossible to forget pictures our mind takes of the positive, transforming events in our lives. Today's episode is Hands on the Will. Death is not the end. I truly believe that. I think a lot of people still believe that life goes on when the body doesn't. However, it does seem that this line of thinking is losing popularity. I've had several close calls with death. Now, I've tried to change this way of thinking, but historically, when I've been in a great deal of pain, I've longed to pass on. Not because I'm depressed, but simply due to my firm belief that there's another world that's free of pain, as long as I'm living how I should, and one where I can still help my family. Nevertheless, I keep fighting death at every turn. Notwithstanding the fight, danger scares the bejeebies out of me. Like when a car runs a red light and passes right in front of me, I can't slow my heart down. Or when I grab a golf club to investigate those strange noises in the middle of the night. No, I don't feel brave at all. I practically have a panic attack. When hearing those mysterious sounds, what I really want to do is wake my wife and tell her to go check it out. Therefore, it may seem strange that many instances where I really almost died, I was perfectly calm. Many times, it wasn't until I looked back that I realized the true seriousness of the situation. That's why this story is called Hands on the Will. It's actually 3 stories with the common theme of wills, brushes with death, and miraculous assistance. My snapshot is me in the passenger seat of our car, a heavy snowstorm outside the windows, my wife sitting in the driver's seat beside me, a truck zooming towards us in the opposite lane, and my hand on the wheel. It was spring, and we had just visited Yellowstone with my parents. There had been a light snow in Yellowstone, which added to its beauty and peace. However, on our way home, the snow came down heavily and quickly resulted in an unplowed and very slippery highway. I don't know if it was an actual blizzard, but driving through the white haze in a car, it certainly seemed like a blizzard. Gratefully, it was daytime, so visibility was above zero, but not by much. This, combined with the icy road, forced a slow drive, with vehicles steadily passing from the opposite direction, seeing multiple cars that slid off the road, and feeling our own car occasionally lose its grip on the road, made for an extremely tense trip. We survived probably a good hour of white-knuckle driving when my wife suddenly lost all control of the vehicle and we began to spin. What's more, a fairly large truck was coming at us in the opposite lane at a speed that only large trucks dare in the snow, and we were about to slide directly into its path. At that moment, my hand, seemingly of its own free will, suddenly grabbed the wheel, which kept my wife from overcorrecting, gave it a tiny turn, and we were back in control. I'd like to think that I'm just that amazing. That in that instance, my instincts kicked in and that I secretly have all the makings of a Chuck Norris or the still and cool thinking of a George Washington in battle. In reality, although I am pretty amazing, I know that my actions weren't my own, and that only by divine assistance did we avoid that truck on that day. My spouse and I were very grateful. My second scenario also involves a car, but I was on a bike pedaling into its headlights. My memory is fading, but I believe I was in Columbus, Mississippi, serving on a mission for my church. Our apartment was at the bottom of a fairly large hill with a long and winding road. When us 19 to 21-year-olds returned home at night, we loved flying down the hill on our mountain bikes. It was admittedly a lot more fun than biking up the hill in the morning. Of course, it was always completely dark when we got home, but familiarity with taking the same route dozens of times and having no prior incidents made us pretty confident that speed was our friend. Well, the usual emptiness of the road must have also made someone else pretty confident, because one night, a car came speeding up the hill while we were on our way down. We always hugged the right side, but the driver was taking the shortest route, whichever lane. This resulted in me coming face to face with the car. I remember seeing the headlights directly in front of me, turning my bike sharply, and something hitting my left pedal causing a quick jerk of my handlebars, which actually straightened me out. I braked and then saw a hubcap roll speedily past me into the dark. I have no idea how I got from in front of the car to a position where my left pedal could knock off a hubcap. But that's what happened. Strangely, I was very calm and my thoughts were on the missing hubcap. So when the driver, out of concern, backed up to see if I was okay, I could only think to assure him and ask if he needed help finding his hubcap. He shook his head and quickly drove away, probably anxious to distance himself from the situation. It's only looking back that I see the impossibility of the physics from the situation. My last incident involved myself, my bike, and a ravine. As missionaries who had to travel long distances on bike, we were always looking for the shortest route possible. Sometimes that would be through a parking lot or a field. Basically, whatever was the shortest distance between 2 points that didn't involve trespassing, that's the way we took regardless of the obstacles. On a particularly long ride from Greenville, Alabama to Fort Deposit and back, which was about 30 miles round trip, we were following an old road that looked to be about the most direct route. While biking along, we ran into a bridge that was out. This was a bit of a problem, as we couldn't simply ride or walk down into the ravine that separated us from the other side because it was straight down and a good 40 to 50 feet deep. We certainly didn't want to go back the several miles to the next road, but there was an option. There was a narrow pathway of heaped dirt, maybe a couple feet across, that ran all the way to the next side. We naturally thought this was the best choice. It was way too narrow to ride our bikes or walk them across. Consequently, we had to carry the bikes on our shoulders. On the way to Fort Deposit and in the light of day, we had no trouble. However, on our return, darkness had descended and the only light we had was the moon and the stars. I do not have good night vision. I once got beamed in the forehead by a softball hit on a long drive for my decision to keep playing as the sun set. It was embarrassing, and I lost the game for us, but that's another story. The point is, my vision was compromised. Nevertheless, we had no problems the first time across, so it didn't seem to be a big issue, despite my partial blindness. So, not really feeling like we had a choice, we hefted our bikes on our shoulders and started back. My companion was in front, and I couldn't really see him. This might be because my focus was on my feet. I must have stepped a little too close to the left side of the dirt strip because suddenly the ground gave out from beneath my feet, and I found myself falling into the ravine. Then, just as suddenly, the top bar on my bike hooked a branch that was sticking out of the dirt just a couple feet down. I managed to scramble up about as quick as I had fallen, without a scratch on me, and proceeded to the other side, not even realizing the danger I had just escaped or the miracle that had just occurred. At the time, it just seemed natural, like that's what happens when you cross a steep ravine on a narrow dirt walk in the night. You fall, your bike catches on a branch you can't even see, and you move on. Looking back and contemplating all these events, I wonder why some events seem so peaceful, despite the danger I was in. As I mentioned, I'm certainly no superhero. I think that's just the way you feel when God's hand is on the wheel. Thanks for listening to Snapshots, Memories that Transform Us. This is currently a monthly podcast. However, I would love to hear and share your snapshots. So if you have one from your life that you would be willing to share with listeners, please submit it to rsidwell@email.com. That's rsidwell@email.com. And let me know if you would like your name attached if read on the podcast or left anonymous. If there are enough submissions, then this will become at least a bi-monthly podcast. Please understand that not all submissions will make it on the podcast. There will be no financial compensation for any submission regardless of what happens with it, and that I may have to edit submissions due to grammar or length. But don't let that discourage you. Your story may impact someone's life for good. This has been Robert Sidwell. I look forward to hearing from you and talking with you again.